Ever been shamed by your own HOA president? Told your passion is childish nonsense. They called me poor, delusional, a failure chasing fairy tales. But I let them believe it until that fateful gala when the ring they mocked as cheap fake jewelry sparked a bidding war worth tens of millions. I just sat there watching Karen's smug smile crumble piece by piece as the auctioneer's gavel rose and fell, each strike driving home a truth she never saw coming. My name is Lauren Hayes, and I've learned that the best revenge is served not with anger, but with a perfectly timed revelation. As I adjusted the sapphire ring on my right hand that October evening, I had no idea that our annual HOA Gala at the Evergreen Clubhouse, the most pretentious venue in Pine Ridge Estates, would become the stage for my vindication. The private dining room smelled of catered roast beef and old money entitlement, with its mahogany panels and crystal chandeliers casting warm light over our table. The board had already ordered their usual, the vice president with his medium-rare prime rib, the treasurer with her dainty salmon. Karen Voss, our HOA president, swept in 20 minutes late, her husband Victor trailing behind her like an expensive accessory. "Sorry we're late," Karen announced, though her tone suggested she wasn't sorry at all. Victor just closed a massive deal with the Koreans. $300 million in assets under management now. She made sure to flash her engagement ring as she removed her coat, a cushion-cut diamond that probably cost more than most people's cars. Victor pulled out her chair with practiced precision, his Patek Philippe catching the light. Everything about them screamed new money trying to look like old money while enforcing rules on the rest of us. "That's wonderful, dear," the treasurer cooed, her eyes lighting up the way they always did when Karen arrived. Lauren was just telling us about her. What was it again? Another flea market find. I took a slow sip of my modest Pinot Noir compared to the Dom Perignon Karen had just ordered for the table. Estate sale. Actually, the Peton Estate in Charleston. "Oh, how thrilling," Karen said, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. "Find any treasures in dead people's attics lately?" The familiar sting of her condescension washed over me. For 3 years I'd been building my reputation as an antiquities appraiser, traveling across the Southeast to evaluate collections, authenticate pieces, and occasionally stumble upon something extraordinary. But to the Evergreen Estates HOA board, and especially to Karen, I was just Lauren, the resident who wasted her art history degree, playing with old junk, and dared to display a few antique garden statues that supposedly violated the aesthetic guidelines. Speaking of treasures, Karen continued, her perfectly manicured finger pointing at my hand. "Is that supposed to be a sapphire? God, Lauren, you can get better fakes on Canal Street. The color is completely off." I glanced down at the ring, a deep blue Ceylon sapphire surrounded by diamonds in a distinctive Art Deco setting. The stone caught the candlelight, revealing depths of color that shifted from midnight to cerulean. To an untrained eye it might look like costume jewelry. To someone who knew what they were looking at, it was something else entirely. "It's vintage," I said simply. Victor leaned forward, squinting at my hand with the confidence of a man who thought his MBA made him an expert on everything. "Vintage is just a nice word for old and used, like saying a beat-up Honda is a classic car." They laughed, that specific brand of wealthy person laughter that sounds like champagne bubbles popping. The treasurer joined in with her tinkling giggle while the vice president chuckled into his bourbon. "You know," the vice president said, cutting into his steak, "Karen's re-election as president was just announced today. Youngest president in the HOA's history. Meanwhile, you're still, what's your official title again?" "Independent appraiser and authenticator," I replied, keeping my voice level. "Right. Self-employed." He said it the way someone might say unemployed. "Karen and the board were talking, and we think it might be time to consider a more stable path. Karen could probably get you an entry-level position helping with compliance paperwork. You'd have to start at the bottom, of course, but with hard work. I appreciate the concern, but I'm happy with my work." "Happy doesn't pay HOA fines," Karen interjected. How's that little house on Maple Lane treating you? Still getting citations for those ugly antique statues on your porch? He moved out 6 months ago, I said, not mentioning that I'd bought the entire corner lot last month. Some secrets were worth keeping, especially from a board who'd already decided who you were. The conversation continued in its familiar pattern. Their successes, my shortcomings, their concern disguised as criticism. The treasurer wondered aloud when I'd find a nice man like Victor. The vice president questioned whether I was saving for retirement. Karen made jokes about my little hobby and how I'd probably end up on one of those hoarder reality shows. Through it all, I twisted the sapphire ring on my finger, feeling the weight of its history. 3 months ago, I'd authenticated this piece as part of a collection that had been hidden since the 1960s. The research had taken me from dusty archives in London to private vaults in Geneva, tracing provenance through wars and revolutions. The ring alone had a story worth telling. But not tonight. Not yet. My phone buzzed against my leg. A text from James, my business partner. Auction starts in 90 minutes. Room is already packed. Buyers from Tokyo, Dubai, and London all confirmed. You ready for this? I glanced toward the main ballroom where I could see staff beginning to rearrange furniture. The Evergreen Clubhouse often hosted private events, and tonight's was one they'd been preparing for weeks. What the board didn't know was that I'd specifically requested this seating arrangement for the gala, knowing exactly what would unfold in the ballroom next door. You're smiling, Karen observed suspiciously. What's so funny? Just thinking about something, I said, tucking my phone away. Probably dreaming about that Victorian brooch you bought last week, she said, rolling her eyes. I saw your Instagram. $800 for someone's dead grandmother's jewelry. You could have bought actual jewelry from Tiffany's for that. Not everything valuable comes from Tiffany's, I said quietly. No, apparently some of it comes from estate sales and flea markets, Victor added, earning another round of laughter from the table. As they laughed, I noticed the auction staff wheeling in display cases through the side entrance. Soon, very soon, those cases would hold pieces from one of the most significant private collections discovered this decade. And at the center of it all would be a sapphire parure necklace, earrings, bracelet, and ring that had once belonged to a European princess who'd fled to America with her jewels sewn into her coat lining. The ring on my finger was the key to it all. The princess's granddaughter had worn it while she showed me the hidden vault in her basement, tears streaming down her face as she finally decided to let the collection go. Wear it tonight, she'd insisted. Let it see one last evening out before it goes to wherever these things go. Earth to Lauren. Karen's sharp voice cut through my thoughts. See, this is exactly what I mean. You're always somewhere else, dreaming about your little antiques instead of living in the real world. You're right, I agreed, surprising her. I do spend a lot of time thinking about the past, but sometimes the past has a way of catching up with the present. What's that supposed to mean? She asked. But I was already watching the auction director heading our way. Right on schedule. The auction director's approach gave me a moment's reprieve. But Karen wasn't done with her performance. She held up her left hand, angling it so the chandelier light hit her engagement ring at just the right angle, creating a small constellation of rainbow sparkles across the white tablecloth. You know, Lauren, she said, her voice taking on that fake sweet tone I knew too well. Victor had this custom designed at Harry Winston. The center stone is 3 carats. VVS 1 clarity. The jeweler said it's museum quality. Everything's museum quality when you're paying retail, I murmured. But she was already turning to the treasurer. We're thinking of having the next HOA fundraiser at the Biltmore. Spring, of course. Can you imagine all those gardens in bloom? And we'd have the entire champagne cellar for the reception. The treasurer clasped her hands together, her eyes misty with joy. Oh, darling, that sounds absolutely perfect. and Lauren can help with setup. Won't that be nice, Lauren? Though we'll have to do something about, she gestured vaguely at my entire existence. About what exactly? I asked, though I knew the answer. Well, your style, dear. That vintage look is fine for rummaging through dusty stores. But for a society event, Karen's friends from the country club will be there. The Vanderbilts, the Ashfords. We can't have you showing up looking like you raided a costume shop. She's right, the vice president chimed in, pointing his steak knife at my ring. And you'll definitely need to leave the fake jewelry at home. This is going to be photographed for the neighborhood newsletter. We can't have you embarrassing the board with that carnival prize on your finger. Victor laughed. A short bark of sound. Carnival prize? That's good. Mr. Vice President. Though I was thinking more like one of those home shopping network deals. Genuine sapphire-colored glass. Only 4 easy payments of $19.99. The table erupted in laughter again. Even the waiter refilling our water glasses seemed to be suppressing a smile. I sat there feeling the familiar shrinking sensation I'd experienced at every board gathering since I moved in. To them, I was frozen in time, the flaky resident who'd never amounted to anything, chasing dreams while Karen built her little empire of fines and citations. Actually, Karen said, leaning forward conspiratorially, I have a friend who sells replica jewelry, high-end stuff that looks almost real. I could hook you up, get you something decent for the next meeting, something that won't make you look so. She waved her hand, searching for the word. Desperate. Desperate. I repeated, the word tasting bitter. Come on. Don't be sensitive, she continued. We all know money's tight for you. There's no shame in wearing replicas when you can't afford the real thing. Better than pretending that blue glass bauble is actual sapphire. You know what the really sad part is? Victor added, warming to his theme. She probably paid good money for that thing. Some antique dealer saw her coming a mile away. Oh, this belonged to royalty. And she believed it. More laughter. The treasurer dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, overcome with mirth at the image of gullible Lauren getting swindled by crafty antique dealers. Remember when she bought that painting? The vice president said, piling on. Swear it was from the Hudson River School. Turned out to be a reproduction from the 1970s. Cost her 2 months of HOA dues. And it was worth maybe $50. That was 6 years ago. I said quietly. I was still learning. Still learning? Karen mimicked. You're 34, Lauren. When does the learning end and the earning begin? I felt my phone buzz again. Another text from James. Princess Adelaide's granddaughter just arrived. She's asking for you. Princess Adelheid. Even thinking the name sent a shiver through me. 3 months of research. Countless dead ends. And then a breakthrough. An elderly woman in Savannah with a story about her grandmother. A princess who'd fled Europe in 1949 with nothing but the clothes on her back and a fortune in jewels hidden in the lining. You're doing it again, Karen snapped. That vacant stare thing. This is exactly what I mean about living in Fantasyland. While you're daydreaming about princesses and treasure, the rest of us are building actual lives with actual jewelry. Victor added, gesturing to Karen's ring again. Not whatever that thing is supposed to be. The treasurer sighed dramatically. I just don't understand where we went wrong with you, Lauren. Same neighborhood, same opportunities, but look at the difference. Karen has everything: power, respect, a wonderful husband. And you have what? A house that keeps getting citations and a ring that turns your finger green. I glanced down at my finger. No green mark. Of course, the ring was as genuine as the insults were predictable, but they couldn't see that. They'd already decided what my story was, and nothing I said would change it. Maybe it's not too late, the vice president said, his tone turning philosophical after his third bourbon. 34 is still young. You could go back to school, get an MBA like Karen. In 5 years you could be where she is now. Where she is now, I repeated, looking at Karen, HOA president enforcing color-coded lawns and fining me $500 every time my antique statues cluttered the aesthetic. I'd seen Victor last month at the Omni Grove Park with someone who was definitely not Karen. But that was another secret I kept. Exactly, Karen said, missing my tone entirely. It's about making smart choices, Lauren, not chasing fairy tales. There's no glass slipper coming to save you. No magic ring that's going to transform your life. The irony was so perfect I almost laughed. No magic ring. If only she knew that the fake on my finger had already transformed my life. The authentication fees alone had paid off my student loans. The finder's fee from the insurance company had bought my extra lot and tonight's auction. Ladies and gentlemen, a crisp British accent interrupted my thoughts. The auction director stood beside our table, impeccable in his Seville Row suit. I apologize for the intrusion, but I wanted to inform you that we'll be opening the main ballroom in approximately 30 minutes for tonight's special event. The Adele Hyde collection auction will begin promptly at 8. The vice president looked up, confused. Auction here? Yes, sir. A private auction for invited guests. Quite an extraordinary collection. Actually, 60 years hidden away and now finally coming to light. The Adele Hyde collection, the treasurer asked, the name meaning nothing to her. European royal jewels, madam, smuggled out during the war and hidden here in America. The discovery has caused quite a sensation in certain circles. We have buyers here tonight from 6 continents. Royal jewels. Karen perked up. Her interest finally piqued by something that combined money and status. Like actual royal jewels indeed. The collection includes a complete sapphire parure that belonged to Princess Adele Hyde of Mecklenburg-Strelitz. Quite spectacular. The conservative estimate for the set is 8 figures. 8 figures? Victor whistled low. For old jewelry? The auction director's smile tightened slightly. For historical artifacts of impeccable provenance, sir. The princess's sapphires are particularly notable Ceylon stones of exceptional quality set by Cartier in 1932. The ring alone, he paused, his trained eye catching the flash of blue on my hand, his expression shifting, recognition dawning. Ms. Hayes, he said, inclining his head slightly. I didn't realize you were dining here tonight. How fortuitous. The table went silent. 5 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me. You know him? Karen asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. I felt the weight of their stares as the auction director continued standing beside our table, his presence commanding attention in a way that made the board suddenly sit straighter in their chairs. We've met, I said simply, offering nothing more. The director, Christopher Hartwell, smiled with the practiced discretion of someone who handled million-dollar secrets daily. Ms. Hayes is being characteristically modest. She's the one who authenticated the entire Adele Hyde collection. 3 months of meticulous research across 2 continents. We wouldn't be here tonight without her expertise. The silence that followed felt like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. I could see the board trying to process this information, their expressions cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that looked almost like panic. I'm sorry, Karen said, her voice pitched higher than usual. Did you just say Lauren authenticated your collection? Indeed, one of the most thorough authentication processes I've seen in 30 years in this business. Every piece verified through documentary evidence, metallurgical analysis, and comparative study with known examples. Ms. Hayes even tracked down Princess Adelheide's last lady-in-waiting in a nursing home in Switzerland, 97 years old and still sharp enough to identify each piece from photographs. But the treasurer's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But she gets cited for yard clutter. Hartwell's professional smile never wavered. The collection was discovered at what you might call an estate sale. Yes, sometimes the most extraordinary treasures hide in plain sight. It takes a trained eye to recognize them. His gaze flickered to my ring again. A very trained eye indeed. My phone buzzed insistently. 3 messages from James in quick succession. I glanced down. Marina Volkov from the Hermitage just arrived. The Saudi prince's representative is asking about private viewing. NBC News wants an interview before the auction starts. I tucked the phone away, but not before Karen caught sight of the screen. Her face had gone pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. I should let you finish your meal, Hartwell said. Ms. Hayes, Princess Adelaide's granddaughter specifically asked if you might spare a moment before the auction begins. She's quite emotional about tonight, seeing her grandmother's treasures go to new homes. She said you'd understand better than anyone what this collection truly means. Of course, I replied. I'll be there shortly. He nodded and walked away, leaving a wake of expensive cologne and stunned silence. The clink of silverware from neighboring tables seemed unnaturally loud. What the hell just happened? Victor was the first to speak, his usual smugness replaced by genuine bewilderment. I think, the vice president said slowly, setting down his bourbon with a shaking hand. We need to discuss what exactly you've been doing, Lauren. Exactly what I've always told you I was doing, I said, cutting into my barely touched salmon, appraising and authenticating antiques. But he said 8 figures for jewelry you authenticated. For a collection I authenticated. There are 43 pieces in total. The sapphire parure is just the centerpiece. 43 pieces, the treasurer repeated faintly. How? How did you even find such a thing? This was the moment I'd imagined countless times over the past 3 months. In my fantasies, I'd delivered crushing monologues about their lack of faith, their constant belittlement and endless citations. But sitting here watching their worldview crumble in real time, I found I didn't need grand speeches. The truth was enough. I found it the way I find everything, by doing the work you've mocked for years. By knowing the difference between Cartier's 1930s craftsmanship and modern reproductions. By spending weekends in archives instead of country clubs. By building relationships with estate sale organizers who call me first when something unusual surfaces. But why didn't you tell us? Karen's voice cracked slightly. Something this big. Would you have believed me 5 minutes ago? You were calling this ring a fake. The vice president was offering to get me an entry-level job doing compliance. The treasurer was lamenting where the board went wrong with me. Why would I share this with people who've already decided I'm a failure? The waiter appeared, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Can I interest anyone in dessert? No, Karen said sharply, then caught herself. I mean, no, thank you. As he retreated, she leaned forward, her eyes fixed on my ring with new intensity. That ring, is it? Is it part of the collection? Princess Adelaide's personal piece, I confirmed. She wore it the night she fled Berlin in 1949. Her granddaughter asked me to wear it tonight for the auction. She said her grandmother would have wanted it to attend one last grand evening. You're wearing a princess's ring, the treasurer said, each word careful and precise, as if speaking them too quickly might shatter the reality. An actual princess's actual ring. The same ring you called a carnival prize. I added, unable to resist. Victor's face had turned an interesting shade of red. But it looks so, it doesn't even look that expensive. That's because you don't know what you're looking at, I said, holding up my hand so the sapphire caught the light. This isn't about flashy, modern cuts designed to maximize sparkle. This is a 17-karat Ceylon sapphire with a color saturation that hasn't been seen in newly mined stones for 50 years. The Art Deco setting contains another 4 carats of diamonds, all old European cuts. At auction, conservatively, this ring alone will sell for between 3 and 5 million. Karen made a small choking sound. 3 to 5 million? The vice president repeated. For one ring. The market for authenticated royal jewelry is extremely strong right now, I said, falling into the familiar rhythm of my expertise. Buyers from Asia and the Middle East particularly value pieces with documented provenance. And the Adelheid collection has something even rarer, a love story. Every piece was a gift from Prince Friedrich to his wife. We have the receipts from Cartier, photographs of the princess wearing them, even love letters describing specific pieces. That emotional provenance adds tremendous value. We, Karen caught the pronoun. You said we have the receipts. My company, Hayes Authentication Services. I incorporated 2 years ago, but I didn't see the point in mentioning it when you were all so certain I was wasting my time and violating every aesthetic code. The layers of revelation seemed to be too much for them to process. I watched as they each grappled with the implications, their expressions shifting like kaleidoscope patterns. Your company, the treasurer said weakly. You have a company with 3 full-time employees and contracts with major auction houses in New York, London, and Hong Kong. But sure, let's talk about that entry-level position helping Karen with citations. My phone rang, not a text this time, but an actual call. James's name flashed on the screen. I should take this, I said, standing. It's probably about the auction. Wait, Karen said, reaching out as if to grab my arm, then thinking better of it. You can't just drop this bomb and leave. We need to talk about, how much? What does this mean? I paused, looking down at her, my successful HOA president with her re-election title and her 3-carat engagement ring and her husband who cheated on her with cocktail waitresses. For the first time in years, she was looking up at me. What it means, I said carefully, is that not everything valuable comes from Tiffany's. Sometimes the real treasures are hiding in estate sales and flea markets. Sometimes the people you dismiss as dreamers or fine for clutter are actually building something extraordinary while you're not paying attention. And sometimes, I added, glancing at my ring one more time, what you mistake for fake is worth more than everything else at the table combined. I answered the phone as I walked away, leaving them to digest that along with their overpriced dinners. Behind me I heard Victor ask the waiter for something stronger than wine, and Karen demanding to know if anyone had a phone charger so she could Google the Adelheid collection. Lauren, James's voice was tight with excitement. You need to get here. The preview is causing a sensation. 3 bidders are already trying to negotiate private sales before the auction even starts. And wait until you see who just walked in. I stood in the clubhouse vestibule, phone pressed to my ear, watching through the glass doors as the board huddled around the table like conspiracy theorists discovering proof of alien life. Karen had commandeered the vice president's phone and was frantically scrolling, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. The treasurer appeared to be having a whispered argument with Victor, who kept shaking his head in disbelief. Lauren, are you listening? James's voice cut through my observations. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia's buyer is here in person. He never comes in person. I'm on my way, I said, but found myself lingering for another moment. Through the window I watched my past and present collide. For 34 years I'd been the disappointment, the dreamer, the one who needed fixing with citations and warnings. Every board gathering followed the same script. Karen's triumphs, my failures, their concern, my deflection. I'd learned to smile through the condescension, to bite my tongue when they laughed at my junk, to accept my role as the cautionary tale they told new residents. But tonight the script had been shredded. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from an unknown international number, MS. Hayes, the Museum of Islamic Art in Doha would like to discuss acquisition priorities before the auction. Please advise your availability. I turned away from the window and walked through the clubhouse's opulent corridors toward the ballroom. The transformation was already beginning. Uniformed staff wheeled display cases into position. Security personnel spoke quietly into earpieces, and the energy of serious money crackled in the air like static electricity. There she is. James appeared at my elbow, his usually composed demeanor slightly frazzled. Thank God, Mrs. Ashworth is getting emotional about letting the pieces go, and you're the only one she trusts. Also, someone from Christie's is here sniffing around, trying to poach you for their European jewelry department. One thing at a time, I said, though my mind was still partially back at that dinner table, watching the board's faces crumble. James led me through a side entrance into the ballroom. And even though I'd overseen every detail of the setup, the sight still took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast pools of light onto navy velvet display cases, each piece positioned to catch the illumination perfectly. Security guards stood at discreet intervals, their presence unobtrusive but unmistakable. The room hummed with the subdued excitement of people who spent millions the way others spent hundreds. Ms. Hayes, Eleanor Ashworth, Princess Adelaide's granddaughter, hurried toward me, her white hair perfectly coiffed despite her obvious distress. Oh, my dear, I'm having second thoughts. Seeing them all displayed like this, remembering how grandmother used to let me play dress-up with them when I was young. I took her trembling hands in mine, feeling the weight of her family's history. Would you like to sit down? We can delay if you need more time. No, she said, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. It's time. Grandmother always said beautiful things were meant to be worn and loved, not hidden away in vaults. It's just seeing that ring on your hand, the way the light catches it. She would have adored you. You know, she had the same eye for quality, the same refusal to be impressed by mere labels. I glanced down at the sapphire, thinking of Karen's sneers just 30 minutes ago. I'm honored to wear it tonight, Mrs. Ashworth. A young woman with a press badge approached cautiously. I'm Sarah Chun from CBS News. We're doing a segment on the rediscovery of the collection. Could we possibly get a brief interview before the auction begins? I looked at James, who nodded encouragingly. The publicity would be good for business. He'd remind me later, but all I could think about was whether the board was still sitting at that table, Googling my name and discovering 3 years' worth of achievements I'd never bothered to share. 5 minutes, I agreed. As the camera crew set up, I noticed a familiar figure hovering near the main entrance. Karen. She'd shed her coat and was trying to edge past security, her head swiveling as she searched the crowd. Behind her I could see Victor arguing with a guard, presumably about their lack of invitations to this very private event. Should I? James followed my gaze. No, I said, a decision crystallizing. Let them see it from the outside. The camera light flicked on and Sarah Chun smiled her professional smile. We're here with Lauren Hayes, the authenticator who discovered what's being called the find of the decade. Ms. Hayes, can you tell us about the moment you realized what you'd found? I fell into the familiar rhythm of the story I'd told to insurance companies, museum boards, and international buyers. But this time, knowing the board was probably watching from behind the velvet ropes, I added details I usually omitted. People assume valuable antiques announce themselves, I said, looking directly at the camera. They expect drama, obvious glamour, but most of the time the real treasures are quiet. They're hiding in plain sight, dismissed as fakes or overlooked as ordinary. It takes patience to see past the surface and courage to trust your expertise when everyone else is laughing at you, or fining you for clutter. Laughing at you? Sarah pressed. Did people doubt the authenticity initially? I smiled, thinking of dinner. You could say that. Even tonight before the auction someone called this ring a carnival prize. But doubt from people who don't understand what they're looking at, that's just background noise. The work speaks for itself. And what amazing work it is, she gushed, gesturing to the displays. The entire collection is valued at the auction house, suggests a conservative estimate of 45 to 60 million for the complete collection. Behind the camera, I saw Karen's hand fly to her mouth. She'd managed to slip past security somehow. Probably name-dropped her HOA president title and now stood frozen near a display case, staring at the contents like someone seeing color for the first time. The interview wrapped quickly, and I excused myself to check on the final preparations, but I couldn't resist walking past the case that had captured Karen's attention. She stood transfixed before Princess Adelheide's diamond tiara, a delicate Art Nouveau creation that seemed to float above its velvet cushion. "Beautiful, isn't it?" I said quietly. She spun around, her face a complicated mix of emotions I'd never seen before. "Lauren, how long have you known about this?" "Which part?" "That I was working on authenticating a major collection 3 months. That it would be auctioned tonight at the clubhouse where we always have the gala, 2 weeks. That you'd call my ring fake and mock my career right before having to watch me be celebrated for the biggest authentication find in recent history." I paused. "That was just lucky timing. I couldn't have known." "No," I agreed. "You couldn't have known because you never asked. None of you ever asked what I was really working on, what I'd achieved, what my life actually looked like beyond your citations and assumptions. You were too busy feeling sorry for me, or fining me, to notice that I didn't need your pity." Victor appeared at her shoulder, his face red with exertion from arguing his way inside. "Karen, this is insane. Your resident, she's like actually important. That Saudi prince guy asked me who I was. And when I said I was the husband of the HOA president, he wanted to know if you were also an authentication expert. I think he was disappointed when I said you were in charge of Lawn Heights." The irony was delicious. Karen, who'd spent the evening flaunting her power and her husband's deal, now watching him realize that her problem resident's name carried more weight in this room than her entire board. "The auction will begin in 15 minutes. Christopher Hartwell's voice echoed through the ballroom. "Please take your seats. We should go," Victor said, tugging at Karen's arm. "We don't have invitations. We shouldn't even be here." But Karen wasn't moving. Her eyes locked on mine. "That house on Maple Lane. You still live there?" "I own the building," I said simply. "Bought it 6 months ago." The authentication fees from a single Faberge egg covered the down payment. "A Faberge egg?" she repeated numbly. "One of 3 I've authenticated in the past 2 years. But you were right about the neighbor noise being annoying. That's why I had the walls soundproofed when I renovated." Each revelation seemed to hit her like a physical blow. The powerful president, the one who'd made all the right enforcement choices, discovering that her failure of a resident had been quietly building an empire while she wasn't looking. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The auction will commence in 10 minutes. The announcement sent a ripple through the crowd as buyers moved toward the gilt chairs arranged in precise rows. I watched Karen struggle with the realization that she and Victor would have to leave, their lack of proper invitations finally catching up with them. "Wait," I said, making a decision I hadn't expected to make. "James, can we accommodate 2 more seats in the back?" James raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Family? Something like that." Karen's face cycled through surprise, gratitude, and something that might have been shame. Victor looked merely relieved to avoid further embarrassment. As James escorted them to seats in the last row, I caught sight of the treasurer and vice president near the entrance, having apparently followed Karen's lead in crashing the event. The vice president was gesticulating wildly at a security guard while the treasurer tried her best to look imperious in her St. John's suit. "Ms. Hayes." One of the auction assistants appeared at my elbow. "We have a situation. The buyer from Dubai is insisting on a private viewing of the sapphire parure before bidding. He's quite insistent." I sighed. High net worth individuals always came with high maintenance requests. "Tell him the viewing was this afternoon. The pieces are sealed for auction now." I tried. "But Rachel," a booming voice with a slight Arabic accent cut through the pre-auction chaos. "You must help me, please. My wife, she will murder me if I return without the sapphires. She saw the photographs and now nothing else will do." Sheikh Mohammed al-Rashid approached with the confidence of a man who'd never heard the word no and lived to tell about it. His presence commanded attention not just from his obvious wealth, but from an energy that suggested he could buy the entire clubhouse if it meant getting what he wanted. "Your Highness," I said, inclining my head slightly. "The pieces are already in position, but you're welcome to view them from the display cases before." "No, no," he interrupted, waving dismissively. "I need to see them properly. The color, the clarity, photos lie, cases distort. You understand this better than anyone. Please, just the ring. Let me see the ring you're wearing if it truly matches the quality of the set. I'll bid whatever necessary." I hesitated. The insurance liability alone made this request problematic. But I also understood the psychology of major collectors. Sometimes the difference between a successful sale and a past lot came down to these moments of personal connection. 2 minutes, I conceded, leading him to a private viewing room adjacent to the main ballroom, and only because Princess Adelheid would have appreciated your passion for her collection. As we walked, I noticed the treasurer and vice president had somehow talked their way past security. They stood near Karen and Victor, the four of them clustered together like refugees in a foreign land. The treasurer was staring at me as if seeing a stranger wearing her resident's face. In the viewing room, under the watchful eyes of 2 security guards, I carefully removed the ring and placed it on a velvet pad under the examination light. The sheik produced a jeweler's loop from his pocket, of course he traveled with one, and studied the stone with practiced intensity. "Magnificent," he breathed. "The saturation, the clarity, Ceylon. Without question, pre-war mining when they still found stones like this." He looked up at me. "You know what this is worth?" I authenticated it at 3 to 5 million as a standalone piece. As part of the complete parure, the value increases exponentially. "Exponentially," he repeated, a smile playing at his lips. "You Americans and your conservative estimates. In Dubai, my wife's friends would kill for this. Not metaphorically, actually kill." He straightened. "Decision made. I'll take the complete set, whatever it costs. You'll have to bid like everyone else, Your Highness." Of course. But between us, what should I prepare to spend?" Before I could answer, James burst through the door. "Lauren, we have a problem. Someone's making a scene in the main room. A woman claiming to be your HOA president. She's telling everyone the ring is fake. Security wants to escort her out, but the press is already interested." My stomach dropped. Of course she would do this. Faced with evidence that contradicted everything she believed about me, her response was to double down on the narrative she'd constructed. "I'll handle it," I said, slipping the ring back onto my finger. The sheik followed me back to the ballroom, intrigued by the drama. I found Karen holding court near the display cases, her voice carrying that particular pitch of upper-middle-class indignation that could cut through marble. "I'm telling you, I know my own resident. She gets cited for yard clutter and thrift store fines. She can barely keep up with dues. There's no possible way she discovered some princess's jewelry collection. This is obviously some kind of mistake." "Or what, Karen?" I asked quietly, but the room had gone silent enough that everyone heard me. She spun around, her face flushed with righteous certainty. "Lauren, finally, tell these people the truth. Tell them this is all some misunderstanding. You found some costume jewelry and got confused, or someone took advantage of you. Or the only misunderstanding," I said, keeping my voice level, "is yours. You've spent so many years believing I'm a failure, or at least a rule breaker, that you can't process evidence to the contrary. Even now, surrounded by proof of my success, you'd rather embarrass yourself publicly than admit you were wrong about me. But you're your Lauren," she said, as if my name itself was an argument. "You studied art history. You live in that house we keep citing. You buy other people's old things. I studied art history and became an expert in my field. I own the lot that house is on. And yes, I buy other people's old things when those things are worth millions and the people selling them don't know it. Christopher Hartwell materialized beside us. Ever the diplomat. Ladies and gentlemen, please. The auction is about to begin. Mrs. Voss, MS. Hayes. Perhaps we could continue this discussion privately after. There's nothing to discuss. Karen interrupted, her voice rising. This is my resident. I think I know her better than a bunch of strangers. She's not some important authenticator. She's just Lauren. Tell them, everyone. The vice president, who had been trying to disappear into the wallpaper, stepped forward reluctantly. Maybe we should listen to what Lauren has to say. Listen to what? More fantasies? This is just like when she was cited for that treasure map statue in her yard, or when she swore that painting was valuable. She lives in a fantasy world, and somehow she's convinced all of you to live in it too. The crowd was riveted. Now several people had their phones out, discreetly recording. I could see tomorrow's headlines writing themselves, HOA drama at high-stakes auction, or President denounces resident's $1 million discovery. You know what the saddest part is? I said, addressing Karen but speaking to the room. I used to dream about this moment. Not the auction or the recognition, but the moment the board would finally see me for who I really am. I imagined surprise, maybe respect, certainly support. I never imagined you'd stand here in front of colleagues and clients and international press and insist that I must be lying because success doesn't fit the story you've been telling yourself, or the citations you've been writing. Victor stood up from his seat in the back. Karen, stop. Please, just stop. Karen whirled on him. You believe this? You of all people. 5 hours ago you were laughing at her ring. Because I was wrong. Victor's voice cracked. We were all wrong. And instead of admitting it, you're making it worse. Can't you see what's happening? Lauren doesn't need us to believe in her. She never did. We're the ones who needed to believe she was failing because it made us feel better about our own rules and power. The revelation hung in the air like incense, heavy and transformative. I watched Karen process Victor's words, watched her worldview crack and reshape itself in real time. 10 minutes until auction, Hartwell announced firmly. All guests, please take your seats immediately. The crowd began to disperse, but Karen remained frozen, staring at me with eyes that suddenly seemed very lost. Is it really worth millions? She asked, her voice small. The ring. I held up my hand, letting the sapphire catch the light one more time. Between 3 and 5 million at auction. But its real value, the history, the romance, the journey it took to survive war and exile and 60 years of hiding. That's priceless. The auction room transformed as the lights dimmed strategically, leaving spotlights on the display cases and the auctioneer's podium. I took my designated seat in the front row, the one marked with a discreet brass plaque bearing my name. Behind me I could hear the rustle of catalogs and the whispered calculations of serious buyers. Christopher Hartwell took the podium with the gravitas of a conductor approaching his orchestra. Good evening, distinguished guests. Tonight we have the privilege of offering the Adelheid collection, hidden for 6 decades, and authenticated by Ms. Lauren Hayes of Hayes Authentication Services. A ripple of polite applause filled the room. I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel the bored stares burning into the back of my head from their seats in the last row. We begin with Lot 1. Hartwell continued as assistants wearing white gloves carefully positioned a diamond brooch under the lights. A Belle Epoque diamond and platinum brooch circa 1910 featuring a central 8.5-carat old European cut diamond. Authenticated documentation traces this piece to Princess Adelheid's wedding trousseau. We will open bidding at 200,000. The numbers climbed swiftly. A paddle war erupted between a representative from the Metropolitan Museum and a private collector from Tokyo. Within minutes the brooch sold for 870,000, nearly triple the estimate. Lot 2, Hartwell announced, his voice betraying a hint of excitement as the energy in the room intensified. A pair of Art Deco emerald and diamond pendant earrings. The pattern continued. Each piece exceeded its estimate, some dramatically so. I made notes in my catalog, tracking the buyers and prices, already thinking ahead to future authentications these sales might generate. The sheik from Dubai bid aggressively on anything with significant stones. A mysterious phone bidder represented by a young woman in a severe black suit pursued the more historically significant pieces. Then came Lot 23. The room seemed to inhale collectively as the sapphire parure was revealed in its custom display case. The complete set, necklace, earrings, bracelet, and ring, gleamed under precisely calculated lighting that made the stones appear to glow from within. Ladies and gentlemen, Hartwell's voice dropped to a reverent tone. The centerpiece of tonight's auction, the Princess Adelheid Sapphire Parure by Cartier, 1932. Each salon sapphire was personally selected by Prince Friedrich as a wedding anniversary gift. The necklace features a 47-carat central stone surrounded by... He continued the description, but I was no longer listening. Instead, I was remembering Mrs. Ashworth's stories about her grandmother, about love that survived war and loss, about beauty preserved against all odds. My hand moved unconsciously to the ring on my finger, the fourth piece of the set that would complete the parure. We'll open bidding at 10 million. The number sent a murmur through the crowd. Even for this room, it was a significant starting point. 10 million. The sheik's representative called out immediately. 12 million, countered the phone bidder. The numbers climbed like a symphony building to crescendo. 20 million. 25, 30. I turned slightly in my seat and caught a glimpse of the board. The vice president was gripping the treasurer's hands so tightly his knuckles were white. Karen had her phone out, calculator app open, apparently trying to compute what 15% of these numbers would mean. Victor looked like he might faint. 35 million. The sheik's representative called out, his voice steady despite the astronomical sum. 40. The phone bidder responded without hesitation. A pause. The room held its breath. 50 million. The sheik's representative announced. Gasps echoed off the ballroom's ornate ceiling. 50 million for a jewelry set. I thought of all the board meetings where Karen had worried aloud about my compliance future and written yet another citation. All the times she'd offered to help with that patronizing smile. 50 million going once, Hartwell intoned, his auctioneering training keeping his voice steady despite the historic moment. Going twice, 60 million. The phone bidder's representative spoke clearly, her face expressionless. Now even the seasoned collectors were whispering. This was beyond exceptional. This was record-breaking territory for a private collection. The sheik's representative spoke rapidly into his phone in Arabic, his gestures becoming more animated. After a tense moment, he raised his paddle. 75 million. The room erupted. Hartwell had to call for order. Ladies and gentlemen, please. We have a bid of 75 million. Do I hear 80? The phone bidder's representative listened to her earpiece, then shook her head slightly. The sheik had won the main lot, but the battle wasn't over. 75 million going once. Going twice. Wait. I stood up, my voice cutting through the tension. The ring isn't included in that lot. It's being offered separately as Lot 24. Hartwell smiled. We'd planned this. Of course, the psychology of separation often drove prices higher than offering pieces as a complete set, but the buyers hadn't expected it. Indeed, Hartwell confirmed. Lot 24, offered separately, is the ring from the parure currently being worn by Ms. Hayes at the request of the consignor. Shall we open bidding at 5 million? What followed was 15 minutes of the most intense bidding war I'd ever witnessed. The sheik, having already committed 75 million to the incomplete set, was desperate to acquire the ring. But the phone bidder, who'd lost the main lot, seemed equally determined to walk away with something. The price climbed, 10 million, 15, 20. At 25 million, a new bidder entered, a representative from a Swiss museum. At 30 million, even hardened dealers were shaking their heads in amazement. 40 million. The sheik's representative finally declared, his voice suggesting this was his final offer. Silence. The phone bidder had gone quiet. The Swiss museum representative slowly lowered his paddle. 40 million going once. Going twice sold. Hartwell's gavel came down with a crack that seemed to echo through my entire life. The complete Princess Adelheid Sapphire Perur sold in 2 lots for a combined total of 115 million. The applause was thunderous. People were on their feet. Someone was shouting about art market records. Photographers pushed forward to capture the moment, and through it all I stood perfectly still, feeling the weight of the ring on my finger and the even heavier weight of vindication. Mrs. Ashworth appeared at my side, tears streaming down her face. My grandmother would be so happy, she whispered, embracing me. Not about the money, though Lord knows the family needed it, but that her treasures caused such joy, such excitement, that people still see the beauty she saw. As the crowd swirled around us, congratulating and questioning and marveling, I caught sight of the board trying to push through the throng. The vice president reached me first, his face a study in conflicting emotions. Lauren, he started, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. 15%, I said quietly. That's my commission on the authentication and sale facilitation. 17,250,000. Before taxes, of course. The number hit him like a physical blow. Behind him the treasurer had gone pale, and Karen was crying, whether from shame, shock, or something else I couldn't tell. I don't expect you to suddenly be proud of me, I continued, keeping my voice low as chaos reigned around us. I don't need your approval anymore. I haven't for a long time. But I hope you understand now that your version of my life was just that, your version. The real story was happening while you weren't paying attention, or while you were writing citations. We're sorry, the treasurer said, the words seemingly torn from her throat. We're so sorry. I know, I said, and found that I meant it. But being sorry doesn't erase years of condescension. It doesn't undo all the board meetings where you made me feel small, or the fines that piled up. I'm glad you see me now, but I succeeded despite you, not because of you. James appeared with a bottle of champagne and several glasses. Lauren, the buyers want to meet you. The press wants statements. Christie's is here with a job offer that would make your head spin. And, he lowered his voice, that was Sotheby's on the phone. They have a Romanoff collection that needs authentication. They're talking about an exclusive contract worth. The champagne tasted like Vindication. Crisp, effervescent, and impossibly sweet. I stood in the center of a crowd that just hours ago I would have been serving drinks to rather than drinking with. Museum directors exchanged business cards with auction house executives while collectors compared notes on future sales. And through it all I felt the peculiar lightness that comes from finally letting go of a weight you didn't realize you'd been carrying. Sheikh Mohammed Al-Rashid approached with the satisfied air of a man who'd just spent 9 figures on jewelry and considered it a bargain. Ms. Hayes, I must thank you. My wife will be beyond delighted. But tell me, how did you keep such composure? Your own HOA board denouncing you moments before the auction. Your Highness, I replied. I've spent years being dismissed by people who claim to know me best, or who claim to enforce standards. One more public embarrassment was hardly going to shake me at this point. He laughed, a rich sound that drew other buyers closer. This is why I trust your eye. Someone who can see past surface appearances. Who recognizes value where others see only clutter and dust. This is rare. I have a proposition for you. Before he could continue, a woman in an elegant Chanel suit interrupted. Ms. Hayes, I'm Catherine Hartley from the Financial Times. We're doing a feature on alternative investment markets. The authentication sector, particularly for royal collections, seems to be experiencing unprecedented growth. Could we schedule an interview? I accepted her card, adding it to the growing collection in my jacket pocket. Across the room, I watched the board hovering uncertainly near the exit, clearly unsure whether to approach me again or flee into the night. Karen caught my eye and took a tentative step forward, then stopped when Victor whispered urgently in her ear. "Excuse me," I said to the reporters and buyers surrounding me. "I need a moment." I walked toward the board, the crowd parting respectfully. The ring, soon to be shipped to its new home in Dubai, caught the light with each step, throwing tiny rainbows across the floor. "You're leaving?" I asked as I reached them. The vice president cleared his throat. "We thought that is you're clearly busy with important people." "Important people," I repeated, "unlike the board." "That's not what he meant," the treasurer interjected quickly. "It's just that we don't belong here. We made that abundantly clear tonight." "You're right," I said, watching surprise flicker across their faces. "You don't belong here. This is my world, built without your support or faith." But that doesn't mean. I paused, weighing my words. The easy thing would be to let them leave, to close this chapter with the same decisive strike of Hartwell's gavel. But easy had never been my path. "There's a private reception after the remaining lots sell. Smaller, more intimate. If you'd like to stay to actually learn about what I do instead of making assumptions or writing citations, you're welcome to join." After everything, Karen's voice was barely above a whisper. "After what we said, what I said, I'm not inviting the people you were at dinner," I clarified. "Those people can leave. I'm inviting whoever you might become now that your comfortable assumptions have been shattered." Victor shifted uncomfortably. "This is all we had no idea. The money involved, the prestige. When I think about how we talk to you, then don't think about it," I suggested. "Or better yet, do think about it. Think about why you were so ready to believe I was a failure or a rule breaker. Think about what that says about how you view success, value, and worth." A discreet cough behind me signaled James's return. "Lauren, the Sultan of Brunei's representative wants to discuss a private collection, and there's someone here from the Vatican Museum." "The Vatican," the treasurer breathed, then caught herself. "Of course. Why wouldn't the Vatican be interested in your work?" The shift in her tone from dismissive to desperately impressed might have been satisfying once. Now it just felt hollow. "5 minutes," I told James, then turned back to the board. "The reception starts in an hour. Decide what you want. But know this, if you stay, it's not to bask in reflected glory or calculate what my success means for your social standing or your re-election. If you stay, it's to finally see me as I am, not as you've imagined me to be or cited me for." I left them standing there and returned to the buyers, sliding back into professional mode. The Sultan's representative wanted authentication services for a collection of Mughal jewels. The Vatican was interested in recovering allegedly looted pieces from World War II. Each conversation opened new doors, new possibilities, new confirmations that I'd built something extraordinary while the board wasn't looking, or while they were busy enforcing rules. The remaining auction lots sold well, though nothing approached the drama of the sapphire parure. As the final gavel fell and the crowd began transitioning to the reception, I found myself standing before the now empty display case that had held Princess Adelaide's treasures. Second thoughts. Mrs. Ashworth appeared beside me, her eyes red but smiling. "No," I assured her. "Just remembering your grandmother fled with nothing but those jewels sewn into her coat. She rebuilt her entire life in a strange country, raised a family, created a legacy, and through it all she kept her treasures hidden, waiting for the right moment." "Waiting for you, Mrs. Ashworth corrected gently. She always said the jewels would know when it was time, that they'd find someone who understood their true value. Not just the monetary worth, but the love, loss, and hope they represented. We stood in comfortable silence, two women connected by more than business, united by our understanding that some things matter more than market value or HOA codes. Ms. Hayes, an assistant, appeared. The reception is beginning. The Times photographer would like a photo of you with the collection catalog. I nodded, straightening my jacket and preparing to face whatever came next. As I walked toward the reception hall, I passed a mirror and paused. The woman looking back at me wore the same clothes I'd put on for the gala, the same understated style Karen had mocked. But something fundamental had changed. The apologetic hunch was gone, replaced by the posture of someone who knew exactly what she was worth. The reception room buzzed with refined energy. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes while small groups clustered around catalog displays, rehashing the auction's dramatic moments. I accepted congratulations with practiced grace, discussed future projects with potential clients, and deflected job offers from rival auction houses. Then through the crowd I saw them. The board had stayed. They stood near the entrance, looking as out of place as I'd felt at every meeting for the past decade. The vice president was studying an auction catalog with intense concentration. The treasurer clutched her purse like a life preserver. Karen had shed her earlier bravado, seeming smaller somehow, diminished by the realization of how wrong she'd been. Victor just looked lost. I had a choice. I could ignore them, let them experience the discomfort of being outsiders in a world that celebrated me. I could twist the knife of their regret a little deeper, payment for years of condescension and citations. Instead, I picked up 2 champagne flutes and walked over. "You stayed," I said, offering glasses to the treasurer and vice president. "We're trying to understand," the vice president said quietly. "This world, what you've built, it's extraordinary. We just don't know how we missed it." "You missed it because you weren't looking," I said simply. "You decided who I was, and nothing I did could change that story. But stories can be rewritten." "How?" Karen asked, her voice small. "How do we come back from this?" I thought of Princess Adelheid fleeing everything she'd known, carrying her treasures into an uncertain future. Sometimes the most valuable thing you could do was start over. "We begin with the truth," I said. "I'm Lauren Hayes. I'm a successful authentication expert with an international reputation and a thriving business. I found treasures in places you dismissed as worthless or cited as clutter, and built a life you couldn't imagine. That's who I am. The question is, who do you want to be in this new story?" The champagne flute trembled slightly in the treasurer's hand as she processed my question. Around us the reception continued, a swirl of congratulations, business negotiations, and the particular energy that follows a record-breaking sale. But in our small corner, time seemed to slow as the board grappled with their shattered assumptions. "I want to be someone who sees you," the treasurer finally said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Really sees you. Not the resident I imagined or the story I told myself, but you, Lauren, as you actually are. That's harder than it sounds," I warned. "It means letting go of the narrative you've clung to for years. The one where Karen is the enforcer and I'm the cautionary tale. The one where value is measured in rules and conventional compliance." Karen flinched. "I've been horrible to you tonight, at dinner, but really for years. Every board meeting, every citation. She stopped, searching for words adequate to the magnitude of her realization. "Cruel," I replied evenly. "Dismissive, condescending. Yes, you have been." "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so deeply sorry." The apology hung in the air between us. A few hours ago I might have craved those words. Now they felt insufficient. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because apologies couldn't erase years of diminishment or the fines that had piled up. "Lauren," A voice called from across the room. The director of the Metropolitan Museum was waving me over, clearly eager to discuss future acquisitions. I held up a finger, indicating I needed a moment. "This is what you need to understand," I said, turning back to the board. "That's the director of one of the world's most prestigious museums wanting my expertise. Tomorrow I have a conference call with houses in France and Italy. Next week I'm flying to Japan to evaluate a collection of imperial artifacts. This is my life, not the fantasy you thought I was living, but my actual reality." "The ring," the vice president said suddenly. "When they announced the sale price, I did the math. Your commission on just that one piece, 6 million. I confirmed, plus the percentage from the rest of the collection, plus authentication fees, plus the consulting contracts this sale will generate. So yes, I think I'm doing fine without that entry-level compliance job." Victor, who'd been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "How long have you been at this level? I mean, when did you become this?" I almost laughed. There was no single moment, no magical transformation. While you all were pitying me, or citing me, at board meetings, I was building relationships, developing expertise, taking calculated risks. The Faberge egg authentication 2 years ago put me on the international map. The Vanderbilt estate collection last year solidified my reputation, and tonight I gestured to the room. Tonight changes everything. The Vanderbilt estate. The treasurer's eyes widened. "But we had that emergency meeting that weekend. You said you couldn't come because of work." "Yes. I was in Newport authenticating a previously unknown collection of Gilded Age jewelry. My fee from that job paid off my student loans and funded the expansion of my business. But you were all too busy celebrating Karen's re-election to ask what work had kept me away." The pattern was becoming clear to them now. All the missed meetings, the vague explanations about work, the times I'd deflected their prying questions about my finances, they'd interpreted it all as failure and noncompliance when it had been discretion and focus. "Excuse me, Ms. Hayes." A young woman with a press badge approached hesitantly. "I'm from Rob Report. We're doing a feature on women revolutionizing the authentication industry. Could we possibly schedule an interview?" I accepted yet another business card, my collection growing by the minute. As she walked away, I caught Karen staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Something between awe and loss. "You're a completely different person," she said. "No," I corrected. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look past your assumptions or your rulebook. The girl who loved art history, who saw beauty in forgotten objects, who believed treasures were waiting to be discovered. That's still me. I just learned to trust my instincts instead of your citations." "Mrs. Voss." James appeared with his usual perfect timing. "The Sheik would like to discuss authentication services for his private collection. He's particularly interested in your expertise with royal provenance. He's suggesting a retainer that would, well, perhaps we should discuss numbers privately." I glanced at the board, seeing the way they hung on James's every word, calculating what retainer might mean in the context of someone who just spent $115 million on jewelry. "Set up a meeting for next week," I instructed. "After Tokyo." "Tokyo," the treasurer echoed faintly. "The imperial collection I mentioned, the Japanese government is finally allowing certain pieces to be sold internationally. They need someone who understands both Asian and European authentication standards. Apparently that's a rare combination." "Apparently you're rare," the vice president said. And for the first time all evening there was genuine pride in his voice. "We just couldn't see it." The reception was winding down now. Buyers departing with promises of future business. Journalists filing stories that would make tomorrow's headlines. Mrs. Ashworth made her way over, moving slowly but smiling broadly. "I wanted to thank you again," she said, taking my hands. "And to give you this." She pressed a small velvet box into my palm. "Grandmother's personal seal ring. Not part of the collection. This was just hers. She would have wanted you to have it. I opened the box to find a simple gold signet ring bearing Princess Adelheide's coat of arms. Unlike the spectacular pieces that had just sold, this was intimate, personal, a connection to the woman whose legacy I'd helped preserve. I'm honored, I said, slipping it onto my right hand where it sat perfectly beside the sapphire I'd soon have to relinquish. Mrs. Ashworth smiled. Grandmother believed that treasures find their way to the right people, just as her jewels waited 60 years for you to discover them. Perhaps that ring was waiting to find its way home to someone who understands that value isn't always measured in market prices or HOA fines. She kissed my cheek and departed, leaving me standing with the board in the increasingly empty room. The gilt chairs were being stacked, the display cases wheeled away. Soon it would be as if the magical evening had never happened, except for the ring on my finger and the fundamental shift in how the board saw me. What happens now? Karen asked. With us? I mean, after everything that's happened, everything we've said and done, where do we go from here? I considered the question. The easiest answer would be nowhere, to let the gap between us remain, a protective barrier built from years of condescension and citations. But Princess Adelheid had carried her treasures across an ocean, believing in a future she couldn't yet see. Perhaps I could believe in the possibility of a different kind of board dynamic. Now, I said slowly, we start over, but on my terms. No more comparisons, no more condescension, no more assumptions about what constitutes success or failure, or what constitutes clutter. You want to be part of my life? Then you need to respect the life I've built. We can do that, the treasurer said quickly. We want to do that. It won't be easy, I warned. You've spent years seeing me through a particular lens. Changing that perspective will take work. Speaking of work, Victor interjected, clearly trying to lighten the mood. I should probably mention that my fund would be very interested in alternative investments. Art and antiques as an asset class are showing remarkable returns. Stop, Karen said sharply, surprising us all. Just stop. This isn't about what we can get from Lauren or how her success might benefit us. Can't you see that's part of the problem? We only value things and people for what they can do for us. It was the most insightful thing I'd heard her say in years. Maybe there was hope after all. The last of the catering staff was clearing away champagne flutes when Christopher Hartwell approached our small group, his professional composure finally allowing a hint of satisfaction to show through. Ms. Hayes, I wanted to thank you personally before we close the evening. Tonight's sale will be talked about for years. The authentication was impeccable, the storytelling compelling, and the results, he smiled. Well, the results speak for themselves. It was a team effort, I said, but he shook his head. The collection would have sold regardless, but your authentication gave buyers absolute confidence. Your reputation preceded you into that room. Do you know what the sheik told me? He said he came specifically because Lauren Hayes's name was attached. That kind of trust is invaluable in our world. I felt rather than saw the board's reaction, another layer of understanding settling over them like sediment. Mr. Hartwell, the vice president ventured. We had no idea the level at which Lauren operates, the respect she commands. Hartwell's expression cooled slightly as he took in the board, clearly recognizing them from the earlier scene. Then you've missed one of the art world's most remarkable stories. Your resident has authenticated pieces in the Hermitage, the Louvre, private collections that never see public display. She's the one curators call when they need certainty. Tonight was exceptional, yes, but it's hardly unusual for Ms. Hayes. With a final nod to me, he departed to oversee the closing procedures. We were alone now in the grand ballroom, just the board and the ghosts of the evening's triumph. The Louvre. The treasurer's voice was barely above a whisper. A Sèvres porcelain collection, I confirmed. They needed someone who could distinguish between pieces made for Marie Antoinette and later reproductions. Took 3 months, but we identified 4 previously unknown pieces from her personal collection. Karen caught the pronoun. You have a team. 3 full-time employees plus contractors for specific projects. Anna handles medieval manuscripts. David specializes in Asian ceramics and Marcus is our gemologist, though after tonight I'll need to expand. The inquiries are already overwhelming. I pulled out my phone, showing them the stream of emails that had arrived during the reception. Museum directors, private collectors, auction houses, all wanting to secure my services before the competition did. This one's from the Smithsonian, I noted, scrolling through. They want help with a collection of Native American jewelry. And this is interesting. The British Museum needs someone to authenticate a recently discovered cache of Roman-era British artifacts. You'll travel to London? The treasurer asked. Next month. Probably, after Tokyo and the Dubai consultation. I paused, studying their faces. This is what I do. This is who I am. A month from now, I'll likely be in a vault somewhere, examining treasures most people never dream of seeing. And I'll be there because I'm the best at what I do. Victor cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. The things I said at dinner, the assumptions I made, I'm genuinely sorry. I judged you by metrics that don't apply to your world. Most people do, I said. They see someone who deals in old things and assume it's a hobby, not a profession. They don't understand that authentication is part science, part art, part detective work. They don't see the years of study, the languages learned, the relationships built across continents. Languages. The vice president perked up. How many do you speak now? Fluently 4. Well enough to read historical documents. 7. You can't authenticate a 17th century German devotional object if you can't read the inscriptions. 7 languages, Karen repeated. And I saw her doing mental math, comparing this to her own accomplishments. When did you learn them? While you were getting re-elected, while the treasurer was redecorating the clubhouse, while the vice president was building his golf handicap. I was working, learning, becoming the person standing here tonight. The words weren't meant to wound, just to illustrate the parallel lives we'd been living. Theirs filled with conventional power, mine with achievements they couldn't recognize. My phone rang. James's name appeared on the screen. Sorry, I need to take this, I said, stepping away slightly. James, what's the yacht? I listened, shaking my head. Tell the Russian oligarch that I don't care if his yacht has a Monet in every cabin. Authentication happens in controlled environments with proper lighting and security. If he wants my services, he brings the collection to yes. I know how much he's offering. The answer is still no. I hung up to find the board staring at me with something like awe. You just turned down a Russian oligarch, Victor said. I turn down clients all the time. Money isn't the only consideration. Reputation, working conditions, the legitimacy of the collection, all of that matters. One bad authentication could destroy everything I've built. Everything you've built? The treasurer repeated. Lauren, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Are you happy? The question surprised me. Through all their criticism and concern over the years, no one had ever simply asked if I was happy. Yes, I said without hesitation. I wake up excited about my work. I travel the world, handling objects of incredible beauty and historical significance. I'm respected in my field, financially secure beyond anything I dreamed, and I get to solve puzzles that have stumped experts for decades. So yes, I'm happy. Then we failed you, she said quietly. All these years we thought we were trying to help, pushing you toward stability and compliance. But you were already successful. We just couldn't see it. No, I corrected. You couldn't accept it. There's a difference. The ballroom was fully restored to its pre-auction state now. Elegant but empty, like a stage after the actors have gone home. The sapphire ring caught the dimmed lighting, reminding me that in a few days I'd have to pack it carefully and send it to its new home in Dubai. It must be hard, Karen said suddenly, letting go of pieces like this ring, getting attached to beautiful things that pass through your hands. For the first time all evening, she'd asked a question that showed genuine understanding of what I did. It is, I admitted, but that's part of the job. I'm a temporary custodian, ensuring these treasures find their way to people who will cherish them. The ring will be loved in Dubai, displayed proudly, maybe worn to grand occasions. That's better than hiding in a vault for another 60 years. Like you were hiding, the vice president said quietly. From us? I mean, all your accomplishments, your travels, your success, you kept it all hidden. Why? Would you have believed me if I told you 3 years ago that I was authenticating a Faberge egg? What would you have said? You'd have assumed I was exaggerating or being taken advantage of or living in a fantasy or violating another code. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted while I built my life away from your skepticism. We drove you away, the treasurer said, the full weight of realization in her voice. Our own resident. And we drove you away with our condescension. I supplied dismissiveness, constant comparisons. Yes, you did. But I found my own way despite that. Maybe even because of it. Your doubt motivated me to prove, not to you, but to myself, that I could succeed on my own terms. What a waste, Karen murmured. All those years we could have been celebrating with you, supporting you, learning from you. Instead we sat at board meetings mocking the very expertise that brought you here tonight. Yes, I agreed simply. It was a waste. The security team was doing final rounds now, preparing to lock down the building. Our conversation had to end soon. This strange bubble of honesty and revelation giving way to whatever came next. I have an early flight tomorrow, I said, checking the time. Tokyo won't wait. Of course. The treasurer said quickly. We should go. Let you get some rest before your important work. The way she said important work, carefully, like she was trying on new words, almost made me smile. Lauren, the vice president said as we moved toward the exit. Would you, that is, when you get back from Tokyo, would you consider having dinner with us? Not at the clubhouse. Somewhere quiet where we can talk. Really talk. No judgments? I asked. No comparisons to Karen. No suggestions about what I should be doing with my life or my yard. No, he promised. Just us trying to know our resident, the real one, not the one we invented or cited. I considered it. The safe answer was no, to maintain the distance that had protected me for years. But Princess Adelheid had taken chances, crossing oceans with hope as her compass. Maybe, I said finally. Call me when I'm back. We'll see. It was more than they deserved, but less than they wanted for now. It would have to be enough. As we stepped out into the cool Asheville night, the valet brought our cars around, the board-sensible Lexus and my own vehicle, a vintage Jaguar E-Type I'd bought after authenticating a particularly lucrative estate. Karen's eyes widened when she saw it. That's your car. 1961, I confirmed. Fully restored. I authenticated a car collection 2 years ago, mostly American muscle cars, but this beauty was hidden under a tarp in the back. The owner threw it in as a bonus when I identified a prototype Shelby Cobra everyone thought was a replica. One more revelation. One more crack in their assumptions. Victor ran his hand along the hood with the reverence of someone reconsidering everything he thought he knew. It's beautiful, he said simply. Beautiful things find their way to people who appreciate them, I said, echoing Mrs. Ashworth's grandmother. Sometimes it just takes a while. We stood there in the October night. 5 people who'd shared a neighborhood and history but were essentially strangers. The valet waited patiently, probably used to post-auction emotional scenes. Lauren, the treasurer said suddenly, urgently, as if afraid I'd disappear. Before you go, I need you to know something. I'm proud of you. Not because of the money or the prestige or any of that. I'm proud that you had the courage to follow your passion, even when I tried to discourage you at every turn. That takes strength I didn't know you had. I've always had it, I said gently. You just weren't looking. The vice president pulled out his phone, hesitant. Could I have your business card? Your real one. I mean, not because I want anything, just I'd like to know how to reach my resident. The real one. I pulled a card from my jacket, heavy cardstock with embossed lettering. Lauren Hayes, Principal Authenticator, Hayes Authentication Services, my direct line, my professional email, my website where articles about my discoveries were archived. I handed it to him and watched him trace the letters with his thumb. We'll call, Karen said. When you're back, if you're willing, we'll see, I repeated, maintaining the boundary. Trust once broken required more than one evening to rebuild. As I slid into the Jaguar's leather seat, I caught a final glimpse of them in the rearview mirror. 4 people standing in a pool of light, watching me drive away into a future they were only beginning to understand. My phone connected to the car system immediately lit up with messages. Tokyo confirming my suite at the Imperial Hotel. Dubai asking about availability in November. The Smithsonian wanting to schedule a preliminary meeting. My life rushing back in to fill the space the evening's drama had temporarily cleared. But I drove in silence for a while, processing the night's events. The auction had exceeded every expectation. Financial, professional, personal. Princess Adelaide's jewels had found new homes where they'd be treasured. Mrs. Ashworth could live comfortably for the rest of her life. My own reputation and bank account had been transformed, and the board had finally seen me. I thought about revenge, how I'd imagined it would taste, how the fantasy of their shocked faces had sustained me through years of dismissive comments and citations. The reality was both more and less satisfying than I'd expected. Watching their worldview shatter had brought a moment of vindication, yes, but also an unexpected emptiness. Because the best revenge, I realized, wasn't in their humiliation. It was in my success existing completely independent of their approval or their rules. My phone rang. James, of course, unable to wait until morning. I've been running preliminary numbers, he said without preamble. Between tonight's commission and the inquiries that have come in, we're looking at potential revenues that could triple our business. We need to talk expansion, another authenticator, maybe 2. Definitely an office manager. And Lauren Christie's called again. They're offering stupid money. I'm not interested in Christie's, I said, turning onto the winding road that led to my home in the neighborhood. Why would I work for someone else when I've built this? That's my girl. He laughed. Oh, and the Times wants to know if you'll do a profile piece. The woman who found a princess's fortune, or something equally dramatic. Maybe, I said, after Tokyo. I ended the call as I pulled into my driveway. The building I'd bought, a restored Victorian that had been converted into apartments, stood proud against the night sky. My house occupied the entire top floor with views of the mountains and space for my reference library and private collection. Inside, I carefully removed the sapphire ring, holding it up to catch the light one last time. In a week, it would be in Dubai, gracing the hand of a sheik's wife at state dinners and charity galas. But for tonight, it was still mine, a tangible reminder of how wrong people could be about value, about worth, about me. I poured myself a glass of wine, a good Bordeaux I'd been saving for a special occasion, and stood on my balcony, looking out over the city. Somewhere across town the board was probably still dissecting the evening, Googling my name, discovering the professional life I'd built while they weren't paying attention, or while they were busy enforcing rules. Maybe they'd find the article about the Medici bronzes I'd authenticated in Florence, or the interview I'd given about identifying forged Rembrandts. Maybe they'd finally understand that their problem resident had been succeeding all along. Or maybe they'd fall back into old patterns, dismissing tonight as a fluke, finding ways to minimize my achievements to fit their comfortable narrative. People rarely changed fundamentally, even when confronted with evidence that their beliefs were wrong. But that was their choice, their journey. Mine was already mapped out in conference calls and plane tickets, in artifacts waiting to tell their stories, in treasures hidden in plain sight that only I could see. I raised my glass to the night sky, thinking of Princess Adelheid fleeing into darkness with jewels sewn into her coat, believing in a future she couldn't yet imagine. She trusted that somewhere, someday, her treasures would find their purpose. Thank you, I whispered to her memory, for hiding them, for waiting, for letting me be the one to bring them back to light. Tomorrow I'd fly to Tokyo, next month London. After that, wherever beautiful things waited to be discovered and authenticated. But tonight I stood on my balcony in my building, successful beyond the board's wildest dreams, finally and completely free from the need for their approval or their citations. The sapphire ring sat in its velvet box on my coffee table, catching stray beams of moonlight. Soon it would be gone, but others would come, each with its own story, its own journey from past to present. And I would be there to authenticate them, to tell their stories, to ensure their value was recognized, because that's what I do. That's who I am. Lauren Hayes, authenticator, expert, success. And nobody, not the board, not the HOA, not the voice of doubt that used to whisper in my ear at every meeting, could take that away from me. The night was cool and clear, full of stars and possibilities. Somewhere, in attics and estates and forgotten vaults, treasures waited to be discovered. Tomorrow I'd go find them. But tonight I simply stood on my balcony, sipping excellent wine, and savoring the taste of vindication. It was sweeter than any sapphire, more precious than any princess's jewels. It was the taste of being exactly who I was meant to be.